Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Authoritas Tea Time SEO. Hope you have got your tea ready, or coffee, or some cake. Hope you had a great, very good, nice pink mug there. We had a good bank holiday Monday, long weekend for some of you, or Memorial Day weekend for those in the US. So here at Tea Time SEO, we at Authoritas like to encourage people to take a break. It's just a 15-minute break away from your computer. We encourage you to connect with others and learn something new. I'm SEO Joe Blogs, and I'm joined here by Carrie Shepard. And we've been running Tea Time SEO for 2 months now. This is our last month of having a daily Tea Time SEO. If you've enjoyed what you've liked so far, subscribe to our video and like the video too. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, I should say, and like our video. Oh, and hello, Stephanie. Thank you for coming. So today we are really happy to have Jason Barnard host Tea Time, and he, as well as Paige and Andrea, will be sharing their very interesting tips around the GMB and knowledge panel. So I will pass over to Jason to start off the webinar, the Tea Time SEO on Tuesday.
Brilliant stuff. You've had a long weekend, Joe, so now you can relax again after your long, relaxing weekend. It was bank holiday here in France on Thursday, so I was working away yesterday and preparing for this and talking to Andrea and Paige about all the things we can talk about in this. And we all got a bit overexcited, all three of us. We found loads of things we didn't know before, and we've opened a big bag of worms and a rabbit hole to go down, whichever analogy you want to use. I prefer the rabbit hole because worms make me feel a bit creepy. Welcome, Andrea. Welcome, Paige. Hello, Carrie, as well.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm going to introduce everybody. Right, today the subject is when GMB and knowledge panels collide. And that came from something Andy Simpson was asking about a few webinars ago. And we're seeing more and more of these knowledge panels and Google My Businesses, and it's creating all sorts of problems, and Google perhaps isn't dealing with it as well as it could. So we're starting to look into that today. I think it's something we're going to have to look into a lot more over the months and years to come. Andrea Volpini, specialist in knowledge graphs, internal knowledge graphs especially, and communicating with Google to help Google understand from WordLift. Welcome, Andrea.
Thanks. Hi, Jason.
And Paige Hobart from Roast, who I met a couple of weeks ago, and who was talking about rich elements, SERP features, SMX London, and your talk was absolutely brilliant, and I loved it.
Oh, thank you, Jason. It was a pleasure to speak alongside you.
Yeah, and we see later on one of your slides, which is where you divide them into yellow, green, and red, and I loved that because it makes so much sense. And from Authoritas, SEO Joe Blogs, and Carrie Shepard. Paige, quickly, you're from Roast. Obsessed with SERP features like me. I just do brand SERPs, but you do them all. I mean, you're the real thing. How many have you got?
We've currently got 40, and counting. We're adding to this all the time. So absolutely obsessed with all of them across brand, generics, everything. We're trying to set up new types of tracking all the time with our partners at MyPosio. Constantly just want to track more and more and more of what's out there. So
yeah, brilliant.
So I'm hopefully going to bring a little bit more of a general view today. Not so specialist as you are, but yeah, really exciting chat.
Yeah, and I mean, I read your blog article where you go through all the 41 or whatever it is, one by one. It's absolutely brilliant article. And then there's historical data through my SEO, if that's how you say it. And I had to introduce you. Is it my SEO?
Alexander says MyPosio because
right.
they're French, but I say MyPosio because I have a horrible English accent. So,
okay,
and
me too.
You can call it whatever you like.
Oh, thank you. Well, yeah, I'll keep that for myself. And Andrea at WordLift, you guys did a report on all the different rich elements, the SERP features, didn't you? That was brilliant.
I did that. I have to tell you the truth, there were so many that then I trained a language model to create the text that it's written in the article. So the article has been partially written by a human and partially by a robot because we got tired of looking at the documentation. And so I trained the system in order to write, what is a carousel and what is a local pack And it's I still have it. So if you have question, I can ask the bot and maybe you can reply with something.
Brilliant.
It's on the edge of plagiarism, I have to admit,
But it's plagiarism by a machine, so there's no kind of...
and I declare it at the beginning of the article. We always say when we write these, with 4 ends and 2 ends are mechanical, we always say, there is a robot here that it's co-authoring the article. So, I mean, don't blame it on us, blame it on the AI.
Okay, I thought I'd switch screen because you were talking about your stuff and we were looking at Paige on the big screen. You do absolutely boatloads with entities in search. And I know that you started entity-based search with the Italian Parliament in 2000.
Yeah.
Which I love. That's such a good story.
We started with open data. And so that's I don't know how I end up in SEO. It wasn't my plan. It just happened.
You couldn't resist. It turned out to be really interesting. I think it's when SEO became entity-based, and that's when you got interested in...
I don't know. I mean, I was building this editor, and I thought it was very cool and very interesting, but the only people interested really were people coming from the SEO industry, so I had to turn myself into become an SEO. But
Right, okay. So you were forced into it against your will. Oh, brilliant stuff. Okay, and now we have WordLift, which is a wonderful tool that I use. I'm the Brand SERP guy, as I said earlier on with Paige. I only look at Brand SERPs. I look what comes up when you search somebody's brand name or their personal brand name, for that matter. This is where GMB and knowledge panels for me are getting incredibly exciting. I collect them. I use the Authoritas SERP API, which is absolutely wonderful, which pulls up the results, sorts them all out, puts them in a nice array for me so that I can then stock them in the database and then study them at my leisure over the weekend instead of relaxing. I have a Brand SERP course, which I've just released the second course. It teaches you how to optimize your Brand SERP. That second course is all about rich element SERP features, how to trigger them on your Brand SERP. And I'm loving it. I'm really loving it. It's great fun teaching. And every now and then I do some consulting work to make a living. That was my notes before I started writing, and I forgot to delete the slide, and it doesn't mean anything.
It's good. It's good.
And this is the result of the work from those notes. Google's adding a lot of local businesses to the knowledge graph. Now, I track not only the Brand SERPs themselves through the Authoritas SERP API, a bit of advertising there, but they're well worth it because they're brilliant. But I also ping Google's knowledge graph API and pull it in. And I'm seeing more and more of these small local businesses getting their place in the real knowledge graph. And now to clarify, local business listings that you see, the Google My Business thing, is just a business listing where you control what's shown. You're allowed to edit it directly. The knowledge graph is Google's understanding of the world, and you can't edit it directly. It's Google's understanding of facts. So these, what I call sprouts, it's the beginnings of Google starting to say, okay, this local business, I now understand what it is, who they are, and what they do. And I'm putting it in the knowledge graph, which is my repository of knowledge about the entire world. So we're getting this duplication somewhere along the line, which is, it would appear, merging in some way. And we'll see later on that's getting quite exciting. And it's also causing a lot of problems. So these are what I call sprouts. This is when Google has the entity in its knowledge graph, but it doesn't yet have enough information to show it as a full knowledge graph there on the knowledge panel, there on the right, because it just isn't very interesting. And I gave a talk last week at SMX London with Paige all about how to nurture your sprouts and help them grow and flourish into full featured knowledge panels. And this is my new favorite topic of the moment. Almost all local businesses have that Google My Business local business listing. If you don't create it, Google will probably create it for you. You're allowed to edit it, you claim it, you edit it, you manage it, and you make your local business look sexy for people who are likely to come into that local business that we all know. And here's an example of a local business where it's quite a big local business, but it has a knowledge panel, that fully fledged knowledge panel that actually has that information, in this case from Wikipedia, but also the headquarters, CEO, when it was founded, facts, information people might want to know about the company, as opposed to the local business element, the outlet. And it also has information about relationships, understanding like Naturex has a headquarters, I didn't know, here in Avignon. And it was founded in 1971, and they have the company itself, Naturex Limited, in the knowledge graph. And so we end up with this, which is a pretty crowded right rail. The right-hand rail has 4 elements in it. And that's rare. And the reason I can find these is because I'm tracking 75,000 brands using calicube.pro. If you want to track your brand, please do put it in there using the Authoritas API. And you see on the right the details of it. We're getting pretty crowded over there on the right. And what can Google do about that? It wants to show the local outlet. It wants to show the brand or the company. It wants to show the parent or the subsidiary organizations. And what it's trying to do is get it right by geo-intent. Andrea was talking about that the other day to me. And in this case, for example, Green King, if I search in Australia, that is on the right, there aren't any Green King pubs, so there's no point in having the local business listing on the right. On the left side, you have the local business listing below the knowledge panel. And I was just looking this up earlier on, and it would seem to me that with the coronavirus and that information, it's temporarily closed. They've been demoted to the bottom because it isn't actually a useful piece of information to go there. And those that aren't temporarily closed are still at the top. Google still thinks they're open. So there is that case of, is this truly a useful piece of information? If it's closed, no, it's not, because you can't go there anyway. But it's trying to get it right. And I think a lot of local businesses and a lot of big businesses like Green King or IBM are having this problem, but they're showing the knowledge graph when maybe they want the local business listing to appear, or vice versa, and it's very difficult to control, very difficult to manage. And Google is, that was my demoted point. Google's trying to sort it out, but it gets a little bit dazed and confused from what I can see. I mean, here's Vanilla Vapes, small shop, somewhere in the UK, can't remember where, London. And on the right, that's in, where was it? Excuse me. Oh, I think that's in Sweden. It's giving a local result for a local outlet in London, in Sweden, and it's getting confused. I think Google's struggling to deal with this duplicate, the need of the user, because on the left you can see there it's got the local business listing. At the bottom it's actually got a see results about, which is the sprout of the knowledge panel, and in Sweden it doesn't even have that. So we're getting a little bit confused, and I think it's something that Google needs to learn to deal with, and we need to learn to help deal with, and Andrea's got tips about that. The one solution that I've seen that I find incredibly interesting, very curious, is this hybrids. In this case, it's Liverpool John Moores University and the Colosseum in Rome, which I did for Andrea, because he's in Rome. And it's taking the local business listing and inserting elements from the knowledge graph into it. For example, the number of enrollments or at the university, or the height of the Colosseum, or the construction date. So it's making these hybrids for these companies or these local businesses that are used locally by people who have to be there to actually use it, but with that international intent, which is people who want to go there either to study at the university or visit the Colosseum. And I think for a lot of businesses, that's going to be something that's going to be happening. At the minute, it's just educational establishments and tourist attractions. Maybe it will expand, and I'm incredibly intrigued. So it wasn't a top tip, but it was oh my Lord, this is going to get really interesting, and incredibly complicated. So the tips are from Andrea.
All right. So there's a lot of things that I learned recently about the GMB collision with entities in the graphs, and things have been, as you said, evolving quite fast. And also with the COVID-19, there has been a lot of changes in the way that data is presented. But one thing that I learned for sure is that it is super valuable to use structured data on your website in order to let Google understand clearly the connection between your official website and your Google My Business listing. And we see tremendous impact when we connect the two using a specific property and schema that belongs to the local business entity type, that it's called SMAP. So you're going to use these SMAP property and add the URL of the listing that you have in Google My Business to connect your website and the data that you have in your website with your Google My Business. Now, what is the impact that we measure? Well, there's several impacts, because we can, from the Google My Business listing or from Google Maps, we could see, for instance, images that comes from your site coming in. So the Google My Business and the Google Maps enriches and benefits from getting this link. But on the other side, also your site, will appear on local searches that are related to your brand. You may say, well, but that always happened because it's my brand site, but that's not true. If you have a large brand and you have multiple retailers that, for instance, are reselling your products. So in order for you as a manufacturers to appear on these SERPs, in these local packs where you have your resellers taking the prime spot with their local packs, you can use the SMAP and reference them, because in any case they're part of your of your sales chain, and there's a lot of value when you start connecting this data. So never underestimate the importance of recognizing yourself as a local business when you are a local business using structured data, and create a connection with the Google My Business. Don't forget about, of course, the consistency of name, address, and phone. This has been around for ages in local SEO, but it's extremely important. Imagine that the knowledge graph has to, combine information coming from multiple sources, and it needs assurance in order to consistently match things. And so if you kind of misspell the name on the homepage of your site, or spell it differently on the Google My Business, it gets harder to understand, hey, that's the same guy. And of course it doesn't happen for large brands, but it can happen for a lot of other smaller businesses. So be consistent in the name, the address, and the phone. Use local business structured data, and particularly pay attention to the SMAP attribute that allows you to connect the two. So that's the first tip. The second tip is that it's coming out of an experience that I'm working on recently of a well-known institution in Singapore, a university that happened to be a Wikipedia page, and that didn't have a knowledge graph panel. And then that was the first time that I could see a case where an organization had an entry in Wikipedia and in Wikidata and in DBpedia, but didn't have a corresponding entity in the knowledge graph. And so at that point, I had to look at the knowledge graph search API that you can also query using JSON's tool. Because Jason does something that it's interesting, because he tracks this data over time. Whether if you use the API, you would just get a snapshot of the situation as is when you make the query. So I had to look at it from the query, and I could see that actually the entity was there, but it wasn't appearing in the SERP. So you have an organization that has an entity in the knowledge graph, but the SERP doesn't present the entity in the form of a knowledge panel. And that I thought, well, that's super interesting. And then, just a couple of weeks ago, or I think last week, Danny Sullivan from Google has kind of got back into explaining a little bit of what the knowledge graph does and what and how things work. And he wrote this specific thing. For local businesses, there is a separate process for claiming entities that operates through Google My Business. Bang! So I got this idea. I say, well, what is the situation of this university that has an entity, but it doesn't have a corresponding knowledge panel in regards to their Google My Business? And I found out that actually they did have a problem with the Google My Business entry, because they changed address and then they shut down the previous Google My Business entry. The problem is that the Google My Business entry was at that point already reconciled with the main entity, and since it's been closed, Google can no longer show the knowledge panel. So once again, put all your effort in understanding if you are part of this organization that have Google My Business as the single point of control of your entity, because if that is the case, as for university and point of interest, as Jason shows us, Google My Business becomes particularly relevant, and you want to make sure that the information there is not only current but it's also updated, because that's going to be your chance to be part of the knowledge graph. And the knowledge graph is not only the side panel, it's also about the carousels, because I mean, in this specific case, the client was actually going after a query that it's not answered with the 10 blue links, but in a very prominent way, Google creates a carousel of entities that represent all the institution in Singapore. And in order to be part of this carousel, you need to have your entity. And in this case, having the entity means that you have an entity, and the entity is properly reconciled with the Google My Business, and it's active. Because if the Google My Business, as in this case, is no longer active, then you will not appear as a Google knowledge graph panel. So that's something super important. Not all the business do have these overlap.
Okay, brilliant.
There's a question that it's coming.
Yeah, Andrea said, make Google My Business a single point of control of your entity. How long does it take to confirm your business listing? Pretend that you were starting a new business now after this COVID-19. So
what I noticed that I've done it a couple of times on both validation, because you can validate your entity if you have the entity separately from the Google My Business, as it happens, for instance, in the WordLift case. So I've done it recently, and things are indeed slower because of COVID-19, because there is less team operating on this validation, and but usually it takes, depending on the way that you do it, if you do it with the phone or if you do it with a postcard, but it can take up to 2 weeks at the most. So it's not going to take too much, even during this time of crisis.
Okay.
So last tip for today, you want to become the single source of truth, right? Regardless of the fact that Google My Business is the entry point. You want to be in full control of the data, because once again, we are in a situation where AI is first. So we're not talking about what we see on the SERP only. We're talking about, for instance, the possibility of interacting with the Google Assistant with questions like, when was WordLift founded, or these famous facts that Jason was showing us. These are also answers in a voice search query. So these are particularly relevant. And the only way that you have to really control this information is to keep a consistent view of the data that you published. So think in terms of publishing data, don't think in terms of publishing pages. Because when you publish your own data, you create your own knowledge graph with structured data or with tools like WordLift, you start to have a control over the data that you publish, regardless of the platforms that you're using. Here you see a representation of my entity on Wikidata. My entity, it's connected with the entity published by WordLift on my website, and maybe Crunchbase, and so on and so forth. So you want to provide as many entry points, as many hints to the machine in order to disambiguate the query in the most simple and effective way, because that's the best way to solve problems and to get the best visibility on both Google My Business and Google Knowledge Graph.
Brilliant. I mean, so we've actually got a situation where the NAPs, NAPs, name, address, phone number from Google My Business comes into the same concept, comes into the idea of building your knowledge graph presence, and local business and knowledge graph presence are now going hand in hand. We don't have the choice. We have to face up. We have to deal with it. Now, Paige, that was brilliant, Andrea, by the way. Thank you. As always, I love doing these. Paige, Andrea, and myself did some research together over Paige's Zoom chat thing. And looked through lots of data, and we came up with lots of great insights. And Paige was spotting lots of things that I hadn't seen. It's a case of not seeing the wood for the trees. Off you go, Paige. It's brilliant.
Yeah, it was really interesting. Within about 5-10 minutes of us just getting on a Zoom, we'd already found a load of stuff that none of us had bothered looking on before. So yeah, I just want to cover that your brand SERP isn't just Google My Business and knowledge panels. There's a load of other stuff going on. As well as the stuff that knowledge panel links to. So we'll talk about that, and the stuff that you can impact and stuff you can't. And then I just want to finish off not forgetting about mobile first, because we often think about knowledge panels on the right-hand side. Let me get a bit closer. My sound's a bit tricky. So on the next slide, you'll see an example brand SERP, and just quite how much is going on. So first of all, we know that all of those bold things in the knowledge panel link through for potentially things like knowledge cards, feature snippets, sprouts, other things. All your social profiles are linked to that. You've got site links from your website. Make sure that those are the ones that you actually want to be appearing. There's PAAs on your own brand. So who's answering those PAAs? Is it you? Is it someone else? Is the Twitter account, is the stuff you're posting there suitable to be in that SERP? Make sure it is. And social map, which can or can't be part of your knowledge panel. It could be a hybrid. It might not be suitable today. But make sure that that information is correct. And that any reviews or questions from customers that you might have are answered. And then lastly, there's a lot of related searches that can really tell you a lot about something. So the example here is Experian app not working is a related search. Now, I think that tells you a pretty clear signal about what people might be searching around your app. So use that data to empower you. Then the next slide just takes us through what actually appears when you click on those bold links in your knowledge panel. There's loads of knowledge cards happening here, as well as like data around people. But just really understand where the data is coming from. I know a lot of clients that have told me they don't want their phone numbers appearing in the SERP. Where is it pulling from? Where can we remove it? And it's a really common issue. But actually, if it's in the knowledge graph, it's knowledge graph data, Google has committed that to its memory. It's going to be really hard to take down. And to be fair, there's so many websites out there that will provide your number on your behalf if you're not doing it. It's better for you to be, as the guys have said, that source of truth, and to provide that good experience that if people come to you, you provide that information up front, but also the number is there if people absolutely must speak to someone. So then the last little bit I've taken out of my latest deck at Turn Digi. If you can click for me, Joseph, thank you.
Sorry.
That's right. Which just looks at the 40 different SERP features that you could potentially be playing with. A lot of your brand stuff is going to sit in feature snippet data or knowledge card data. Just be aware of what's happening there. So Jason did a really good book at SMX about how feature snippets are generally the first step before a knowledge card. So if there is a feature snippet linked to one of those bold elements, I mean, make sure, first of all, that it's your website. If it's someone else's website, why? And then if it's going to become knowledge card data, you want to make sure that you're owning that result and that it's correct. And there's loads of other stuff that you just need to be aware of that could exist on your brand SERP. So there's a few links on there with that where I go into a bit more detail, but we don't want to go into too much detail here, but there's a live dashboard and a glossary and me talking about this on Turn Digi as well. And then very, very last thing, I just want to highlight to make sure that we're thinking mobile first. It's so difficult to think mobile first when you're thinking brand SERP, because you naturally want to look at the desktop, you want to look at that layout, you've got your right track, your left track. But just remember that on mobile, everything is together. And it can look very, very, very different. For example, this one even got that app download. The tracking both how you look on mobile and desktop is imperative. And that's it from me.
Brilliant stuff. Amazing. I mean, lots and lots of stuff going on there. I mean, the mobile thing is, you caught me out, terribly guilty of just doing screenshots of desktop. And the thing is as well, the knowledge panel is getting split into different chunks within that mobile result. So you'll actually see a bit, then few results, then a bit more, and it's getting fragmented. And the point about the feature snippet being the step just before the knowledge graph is actually Andrea who said it to me. I've just been playing with it, and I was giving an example of what I was doing was pushing information into the knowledge graph, and Andrea was talking about your site is, and you as well, make your site the source of information and truth about yourself, and that's what I've done. And the example I gave was that I said Jason Barnard plays the ukulele. And I don't, I play the double bass. And Google was so confident that what I was saying about myself on my own site was true. It just showed it in a feature snippet in about 20 minutes. And then I changed it to Jason plays the double bass, and it changed it to Jason plays the double bass. And that's quite a level of control over what Google's showing. And I think, Andrea, you can probably talk a little bit more about that. If you can get Google to trust you as a source of information about yourself, by, in my opinion, proving yourself to be truthful and honest and accurate over a long period of time, you've got it made. That was a question.
I mean, that's there are so many different ways in which information becomes kind of confirmed inside a knowledge graph, and this is why I think it's interesting what we were trying to do the other day to collect the different entity types, the different classes, because based on the class we might see a mechanism for creating triples, because the getting data about a company, it can come through Open Corporates, it can come through Crunchbase. Maybe it's not the same as getting information about a musician, because that can come from music brains. So there is a lot of collected in publicly available knowledge that machines can use to gather facts. So the question is, what are these reliable sources of information that we need to control as a brand? Because that's becoming part of the digital marketing efforts is kind of expanding our reach. And I'm not sure if it's a problem for me when information comes from JSON site, or sometimes there is a network of sites that I'm confident I'm okay in having my personal information be displayed. I'm okay, for instance, for our plugin, if some of the information comes from pages that we have on WordPress rather than our site. I know that it's not beneficial in terms of traffics and clicks, but it's consistent information that I have control on. So
sure. Yeah, I mean, and Paige, you were talking earlier on about, telephone number was your example. You don't want to show your telephone number. You don't have a choice. If Google finds it, Google will show it because it's public information. It's been shown out there. You lose that control. And sorry, can you expand a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you lose that control if Google's committed that to the knowledge graph. Because the first question they get asked, especially for clients to remove that phone number from their website, is where are they pulling this from? And it could be a historic version of your own website. It could be multiple other trusted websites. It's much better to be in control of those sources of information than to try and hide it and it find whatever it wants somewhere or another.
Yeah,
well, I believe in the case of the phone numbers, if you claim your entity in the knowledge graph, then you do have, an opportunity to ask Google to remove that type of information. I mean, it goes through the process, so it's not immediate. It's not that, you have immediate control on it. But of course, if you have been claiming that panel and then, you add the feedback that phone number should be removed, then I believe that they will be removed.
And that brings us on to claiming your knowledge panel. I mean, if you're a brand and you have Search Console control, or the property, the property that Google recognizes being the official site in your Search Console, then you can claim it pretty simply through Search Console. But if you're an individual, you can't do that.
You go through the documentation. Yeah, you go through the identification ID, whatever ID you have. I mean, it's a very similar process also on LinkedIn if you have to claim back a profile, or even Facebook for that matters. I mean, there are humans behind this large data set that should prevent our information to be kind of manipulated or providing false information.
I've heard people kind of saying, "Oh, it's such a complicated process," and it is. You have to give a copy of your passport, 3 social accounts when you're signed in, and it shows that you can actually control that account. And they're trying to link it all together. But as you're saying, they're trying to protect us from other people manipulating our data.
Yeah, I mean, identity theft. It's really an issue, because I mean, if
Google
I claim
has a big responsibility.
Yeah, I mean, if I claim your profile and I start wearing,
Sorry, I just woke up the phone.
So yeah, I mean, it's a big issue. It's a big issue. Making sure that information is valid, is consistent. Also, making sure that information is always fresh. That's the other big problems of this large knowledge graph. Is that the main source of it's the encyclopedia, but the encyclopedia is not changing as fast as it should. So you have to add other mechanism that kind of keep the information fresh and correct. And so
and some of the examples we were looking at with Paige earlier on, Paige, you can comment on this. I mean, the freshness of sports results, for example, is pretty good. But for company, it's much more difficult. What can you say about that to finish off this meeting?
Oh, what can I comment on that? I think this is stuff that people care about, like sports results will always get like real time, like the stock markets and shares gets a knowledge card in real time. Your business information, much like your crawl budget, is not worth Google's time to keep updating every single minute. So I would say it's probably similar prioritization of resource on Google's part.
Yeah, no, and if we have a little bit of empathy for Google, I mean, empathy for Google sounds a bit contradictory, but what are they looking to do? I mean, my company and my person are not very important to them in the bigger scheme of things to keep it all up to date. But sports results and stock market prices, very good examples are. So we have Google My Business, which is up to date, real time, Google Maps, real time, knowledge graph, solving geospatial queries it's never seen before in real time. Amazing stuff. The knowledge graph is moving that way, but pretty slowly at the moment, but maybe it will get there. How very exciting. That was amazing. I found 2 new best friends for the Brand SERPs. I'm happy as a lord. And I'm just going to say thank you very much to you two, of course.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks to Authoritas.
And thank you for the audience for listening. We didn't get many questions. I hope that's because everyone's going, wow, this is mind-blowing stuff. And tomorrow it's What is a Bad Link? Assessing Your Links in 2020 with Dylan Adamek, Laura Hogan, and Sam Muck-Roberts, which is a great name. And that's tomorrow at 4 p.m. tea time with SEO Joe Blogs, Carrie Shepherd, and we won't be there. Back to you, SEO Joe Blogs in the studio.
Thank you very much. A big thank you as well to Andrea and Paige for sharing your tips, and Jason for being a host, as well as sharing his insights too. So we've had a lot of views today. I just wanted to give a shout out and thanks to everyone that's come: Ben, Marit, Arij, Claire, Stephanie, Sarah and Lawrence, Andy coming in from the US, Sarah, Nicole, and Stephanie. So everyone's had some great, really enjoyed it. So Ben said, thanks, Andrea, never heard of the hash map until now, so we'll investigate.
That's good.
Yeah, and Marit as well, Meg, interesting. I'm also going to research that, the hash map. Stephanie saying, I feel like the knowledge panel GMB is one of my lesser known areas of SEO, but now I've learned loads, so thank you. Big thanks also to Paige from Marit and Arij. Really good content. Thank you all from Lawrence. And people were just talking about Lawrence, he's saying, Jason, you need to come up with a different terminology. I mean, no one likes sprouts. Is there another terminology we can use?
Nobody likes what, sorry?
Sprouts.
Oh, nobody likes sprouts. Hang on, I only said it for the... I said it for the first time last week. So saying nobody likes it is it's pushing it a bit. Maybe Lawrence doesn't like it. And can we have a vote? Who likes it? Oh dear. Oh, well, there you go. I'll stop saying it. I'll find another term.
No, it was just a comment.
They like sprouts.
I couldn't think of anything else. And it just kind of this idea that a sprout kind of takes root and then it grows, you nurture it, and it grows to be a strong plant. I like that.
That's good.
Yeah, I'll probably not sleep tonight. I'll be trying to think of another way. Anyway, yes.
Sprouted. Like sprout.
Sprout.
But thank you very much, everyone, for coming today. We had some a great turnout on the Tuesday right after bank holiday. We're running this every day for the rest of this month, and then we're all going to do this on Mondays and Thursdays from June. And we've got a full lineup for this week. But if anybody would like to share the stage with Helen to talk about Google Analytics this Friday, please let us know. Otherwise, she will be sharing loads of great tips by herself, which she doesn't mind. Oh, Marit saying, I'm a no on sprouts. Sorry, Jason.
Oh.
Sorry. No, Claire saying, hi, Claire. No sprouts. So thank you all for joining us.
If the sprout thing is really a thing and an issue, then I'm happy to hear the criticism, but try and be polite.
Well, thank you all. And yes, tomorrow we will be back at 4 p.m. for Tea Time SEO. So if you've enjoyed the show today, like our video and subscribe to our channel. And we'll see you tomorrow for tea.
Thanks
Thank
a
you.
lot. Bye-bye.
Ciao, ciao. Thank you. Ciao,
Thank
ciao.
you.
Thank you. Bye.